What's up everyone, Michael here with another topic video. Today we're going to talk about Elite Lord of Alliance, which is the game in the background. It was also called ELOA, if you want to use the short name, and that's how I'm going to call it from now on because it's easier to say, so deal with it. But yeah, ELOA ended up being shut down by WebZen, which was the version that I originally reviewed about a year ago. I think it was like 11 months ago, which is actually my most popular video. It has over 4,000 views, which is huge for my channel. So thank you to everyone who watched that video. That's super awesome. But regardless, WebZen ended up deciding to shut down the game because the player base just wasn't there. However, another publisher ended up seeing it, called Game&Game, and they're like, you know what, this is an awesome game, so we're going to end up picking it up. And so almost immediately after the game was shut down on their servers, another server ended up launching to where the game was immediately up and available to play, which is pretty awesome. Now, this version of the game is currently in, I think, an open beta state, pretty much. They're still doing some server testing. Creating an account is an absolute nightmare. And the player base isn't exactly there for this version either, and there's a few reasons for that. One, it took me 2 hours to even find the damn game. Like, I knew it got revived because I saw a little news article on one of my news sources. I can't remember who it was, so I apologize to them, but they were like, hey, yeah, it got revived. I'm like, all right, cool. Where is it? And it took me 2 hours to actually find the game and create an account, which was an absolute nightmare. I ended up having to use like 3 different email addresses, which was kind of crazy. Hopefully that gets fixed because the game is actually pretty good. Now, Game&Game is an international Korean company, so what they do is they take Korean games and Korean software, I would assume as well, and they publish it in other regions as well as internationally. So they have a few games that are international releases, and then they have a few that are NA and EU others. And so this version of the game actually has EU and NA combined together. It is a single server, which will definitely help with the player base. One thing that WebZen kind of screwed up on is they made it so that the game had like 6 different servers that you could play on. And all of them were pretty much empty, and they ended up having to do mergers quite quickly. And so this was another reason why the game kind of failed, is that, you know, nobody was able to find each other because they were all on different servers. So, hey, that doesn't really work. But this version is on one server. It does lag a little bit for me, as I said, and I don't know if that's a server issue or if that's just because of my location. But hey, there you go. But I wanted to make this video because ELOA Online is kind of an interesting game in the fact that it's not a bad game. I like it quite a bit. It looks a little bit dated now, especially since it came out over a year ago, and it was already outdated by the time it was released in the US, but it had some release troubles because originally when it released in the US, it actually wasn't an official version of the game. So this is where we're going to get into kind of what I wanted to talk about originally. Now, it is revived, so that's basically the main point that I kind of wanted to bring up. Is it is still alive. It's difficult to find. It is under Game&Game. I'll link it in the description and whatever, so you can end up finding the game. And it still runs and everything like that, and you can get players on it, and it seems to update pretty quick as well. However, it's impossible to find on Google. I tried doing a Google search. I didn't find it anywhere. I even found my own review before I actually found the website to actually download the game. I actually had to go through an external link through a random article that I ended up finding on page like 17 or something like that. Like, I actually took quite a bit of time to find this. But regardless, let's actually talk about ELOA Online and kind of where it started. So originally it was released in Korea, and it was actually fairly well received, and it still is. I think it runs through Netmarble. And it's actually still got quite a decent player base, and they're getting tons of updates. Now, those updates ended up coming over here as well, so, you know, we're getting those over time. This version isn't quite up to date as the WebZen version was. I think WebZen ended up stopping updating after a while. Ooh, we get into a dungeon. And so it ended up getting farther and farther behind, as other ones do. We don't really have any info on whether this version of the game is going to end up getting updated or anything like that, which is a little bit unfortunate. But originally when it released in the US, it actually ended up being an unofficial private server. And the way this kind of worked was another developer was apparently working on the game. It was a collaboration effort. However, very early on in the development, they ended up splitting off, and then NPIC ended up being the single developer on the title, which is still the developer publishing the game, or not publishing, but developing the game. And what ended up happening is one of the private versions, one of the closed beta variants that they had, ended up being stolen or taken out of a server, or, you know, the kind of details on this are a little bit sketchy because nobody really knows exactly what happened because, hey, they're not going to start outing their company. But regardless, it ended up releasing under the name Spirit Online. And Spirit Online ended up being a very early, development version of this game that was sort of modified to work. And one of the problems with that version of the game was they weren't going to be able to update it properly because, well, quite frankly, they didn't actually have the source code of the game. It was just like a few builds or something like that, and so they ended up having to do some hacky server stuff. So it was an unofficial private server, and this obviously ran into some legal issues when WebZen ended up picking it up for the US and EU launch. Now, when this ended up happening, InSpirit Online was questioned quite a bit because it already had a player base and people were like, I can already play this game. What is this other version of the game that is a completely different name, but with the same exact branding? And what ended up happening is the InSpirit developers were, at first they were like, yeah, we're the official version of the game and we'll keep it updated and yada yada. And then it ended up not being the case, and later they ended up finding themselves in hot water and had to close down the server, most likely thanks to WebZen picking it up. Their original kind of complaint was, after they ended up kind of having their pants fall down, because WebZen's like, hey, we actually have the developers of the game on our side, then they kind of were like, yeah, well, nobody was releasing it in the US, and so they kind of ran into some problems. Now, skipping on below the drama, after that server ended up closing, WebZen ended up, kind of carrying on the game, and the server kind of looked like it was actually going to be quite active by the time I ended up getting my review done. And I was like, you know what, this actually looks quite good, and I ended up doing a fairly decent review of it. I was fairly positive. I think it's a fantastic game. Boss fights are a little bit crazy, as we see here. They throw out a lot of stuff. I have NPCs with me because I'm not in a party, which is another thing they ended up adding in this feature update that's not actually mentioned in my review, so that's a thing. And anyways, the game ended up getting a fair amount of updates. However, the player base apparently over the year ended up dying. And so WebZen's like, we can't support this game anymore. After several server merges, name account issues, and yada yada, they ended up closing it down. However, immediately after, Game&Game saw it and they were like, hey, you know what? We're going to pick this up. Most likely what ended up happening is NPix's like, hey, we have this game. We love it. Oh man, my inventory is full. I just need to empty something out of my inventory real quick. I don't care if it's better because I'm not going to play on this character. I don't have inventory space. Just throw stuff away. I don't care. Regardless. And so most likely what happened was NPix's like, hey, we need to actually publish this game because it's awesome and I like it quite a bit. So they ended up doing that. And so what ended up happening is that they found Game&Game. And Game&Game's like, hey, you know what? Sure, we'll release it in another region. So they ended up doing that. Now, what ends up happening now is the fact that ELOA Online has had 3 different launches in the US, which means that it's going to have a large kind of problem getting people to come back to it because the future of the game is completely unsure. I remember getting asked a lot of questions when I did my review originally was like, is this game going to last? Because people already knew about the InSpirit Online version kind of already crashing down, and they didn't know which one was official. Or people who didn't even know, obviously it's a free-to-play game from Korea, they always ask, hey, is this even going to live? Because there was another one that released as well that WebZen ended up shutting down called Asta, which was actually not that great of a game. I actually got a review key for it in closed beta, and they're like, hey, check out our game. It was terrible. I hated it. But hey, ELOA Online was actually pretty good, so it was kind of lame that they ended up actually making an article on their website, or on the WebZen website was like, yeah, we're shutting down Esta. Also, ELOA Online's shutting down, like just in the background, and that kind of annoyed me. Hey, I got my Lord variant. I like my Lord variant. I'm a fiery demon person because that's how I am on this class. Anyway, so yeah, so basically the game shut down immediately after Game&Game's like, hey, we'll get it going. Now, it's not completely up to date, as I mentioned near the beginning of this video, but it ended up being quite interesting, and I think that they're going to have a lot of trouble kind of getting players into the game again because they have had so many versions of the game. Now, like I mentioned before, like I tried Google searching for this game. Literally could not find it. I found literally everything under the sun before I ended up finding this. I found completely unrelated games before I ended up finding the download link for this game. So they might have a few troubles kind of getting this game rolling. Which means that, obviously players are not going to find the game unless they actually kind of fix that. And I think that's mostly going to be on Google. I think that they, need to update it and everything like that because, hey, I know that a lot of free-to-play sites and game searching sites and other reviewers such as myself have ended up already kind of updating their links, or at least the people who already know about the game's change. But I seriously don't know if I can actually recommend it at this point. Like, in my review, I actually said that it probably doesn't have a lot of staying power. My review is fairly positive. I like the combat system, and I'm actually having quite a bit of fun playing it now. Like, now that I'm coming back to it, it seems like the server's not lagging as bad as it was earlier for me, so it's actually quite fun to play. That may actually be a dynamic system to where maybe the beginner area of the game, like when there's not a lot of players, maybe it ends up lagging more, or maybe that was my internet or something like that, but it's actually not lagging too bad right now. So that's nice. But regardless, I think that, in my review, I said it probably doesn't have a lot of staying power, and that it had a few problems to where it really wasn't doing anything that was kind of like breaking the MMO meta. Now, there's not a lot of top-down action RPG MMOs that are good, at least. And so this is definitely one of the better ones in that genre. However, I also don't think that it has a lot of staying power, and I stick by that. My review is very much kind of still what I think about the game. Now, obviously, the server and cash shop stuff doesn't even have any sort of relevance on here, which I haven't even looked at the cash shop for this game because I don't even care on this version. It may have some pay-to-win stuff, I don't know. Quite frankly, I'm just glad the game still exists. I hate it when games just randomly shut down. I absolutely hate it, especially when a game is good. Like, this game is actually quite fun. It is a good action, like, top-down action RPG. Like, I would say that it's actually really, really fun to play if you're looking for one. However, it doesn't have a lot of staying power. We don't know if it's actually going to stay alive. We don't know if Game&Game is going to keep the game running. Now, I know they have a bunch of smaller titles and stuff like that, so chances are it will, and the developer seems very, very passionate about their game. Like, they obviously went out and found another publisher for their game when it got shut down, so they obviously care at least to some extent. And I know other publishers or other developers ended up doing this as well. Now, one of the best examples is Neo People, who actually have multiple games under their belt, but one of their most notable titles ended up being Dungeon Fighters Online, which is one of my favorite MMOs from the olden age. Like, I actually love that game quite a lot, and I wish I played it more, because it is actually quite a lot of fun. It is a classic brawler and stuff like that. But one thing that they ended up doing in the long run, after like several versions of the game ended up getting shut down because player bases, cash shop stuff ended up just like all crashing down, they ended up just self-publishing it after a while. And they're just like, hey, we have an international version. And I feel like ELOA Online, maybe they'd end up being able to do that, because I think if they ended up finding the player base for it, people would play it. Because it is a fun game, and it is very well made. It may not stand up graphically, but it is kind of interesting. And, Dungeon Fighter Online is also another one that, falls under that umbrella, to where it's a game in a genre that doesn't have a lot of titles that are actually good. Like, I know there's a lot of top-down action RPGs. I've actually done a few reviews for them. Like, there was Devilian that I did, and that one was okay, but I really didn't find it that entertaining. And even that game is falling in its player base. But at the same time, maybe self-publishing will work for them in the future if Game&Game end up not doing it. And I hope that's end up what's happening, because I actually enjoy this game quite a bit. And I may actually come back to this game and play it. I may not. I don't know. I have lots of games currently I'm playing through, like JRPGs and stuff like that, for reviews. So I just don't have time to go through a lot of these games. But regardless, it's a good title, and I'm kind of glad that it ended up staying. Ooh, applying the new transformation. I turn into a flower. Yes, this is something that you can do. You can play a flower. Anyways, I'm going to end this video here. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, and I really hope for a good future of this game, because it is a good game. And I hate it when publishers end up kind of closing down games. One of the reasons why, I was talking about Dungeon Fighters Online. One of the reasons that Dungeon Fighters Online ended up shutting down in several ways is a lot of the cash shop stuff got ridiculous and super pay to win. Thankfully, when they ended up self-publishing, they didn't introduce all of that pay-to-win stuff. They didn't introduce the super overly expensive cash shop. The cash shop in the game is actually kind of sane. I hope they end up doing that with ELOA Online. I love it when developers are able to self-publish, but that just can't happen for everyone. But anyways, this has been Michael with the topic video. We are talking about ELOA Online. It ended up getting revived, so if you ended up playing this game, god damn it, my inventory is full again. I need to expand my inventory, but I don't have the money to do it. Screw it. I don't need these potions. Go away. But regardless, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you end up wanting to play this game, it's through Game&Game. I have a link in the description. Hopefully they end up showing up in search results sooner or later. I know they showed up in Bing, which was kind of interesting when I searched for Bing. So if you use Bing, you might be able to find Game&Game. But if you don't, just search Game&Game. You'll find it under their webpage. Or just search in the description. I have it linked, whatever. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. You can also check out my reviews. I will link the ELOA review in the description and my in-slate, so if you want to end up checking out the game. The early game is basically the same. They've made a few quality of life improvements. The performance of the game is way extremely better. It performs like a dream now. It's running at 60 FPS. It's not stuttering. I had a few loading stutter when I first entered the area, but I think that's just because my hard drive is slow as hell, and I'm also recording on the same drive because my recording drive died. So, yeah, that's most likely why. But regardless, Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.